So before we go any further, I actually want to make our views and URLs a little bit more dynamic like admin is already set up. So what we've got here is actually including a bunch of URLs that just aren't listed out. So if we wanted to see those URLs and we went in and just did, let's say like admin / just some random stuff, it will show me a bunch of other URLs that are related to the admin itself. So that's what we want to work with. We want to work with URLs in a very similar fashion where it's all combined into one area. And that is going to be our app, because our app's going to control all of our stuff for us that are related to posts. So let's go ahead and create a new file inside of posts. And I'm going to call this urls.py or urls.py. And I'm going to go ahead and copy everything from our main configuration here, paste it in. The only thing that's different is I don't need the admin anymore. I'm going to get rid of that. And I'm also just going to keep the $sign. I'm going to get rid of the front part of post and just keep the $sign there. Then go back into urls.py, main configuration folder, and I'm going to import one more thing. I'm going to import include. So include is going to allow us to use those new URLs, much like the admin uses those. And this time it's just going to be include, and instead of this whole string here, it's going to be post.urls. And we can get rid of everything else. So that's going to include all of the post URLs. But since the regular expression has this $sign here, I need to get rid of that. Otherwise, the pattern will stop. We will come back to those patterns changing once we get into more details of URLs, but that itself will allow us to go through these patterns. So now that we've got that, we can go back into posts. And we still have hello showing up, right? So if I change the now post URL to ABC and I refresh into posts, it's showing the two different methods that possibly could be there. That first post is not there, right? Okay, cool. So now that we've got that, let's actually go back into our view and let's do the CRUD stuff for our view. Now remember, CRUD is create, retrieve, update, delete. But in our case, we want to add one more thing in there. So I'm just going to copy this a few times and paste it in here. So each one is a brand new view function that's going to handle various things. First one is going to be create. The second one would be retrieve, but we're going to call it detail. So that takes place of retrieve or read. And then we'll also do list. So this is going to be like, list items. And then finally update and delete. All right, so these are all individual views for what's going to be going on right there. So since we have these, we can also put this into our URLs virtually the same way. So it's going to be slightly different. And we actually can do that import that we didn't do in the last one, and we mentioned that we didn't need to. So now we can do from import views. And now we can go through each view itself. So this is now coming from the documentation specifically for the URLs inside of the post app. The reason I can do it inside of the post app, and I do not recommend doing it inside of the main URL configuration app, was because of those conflicts with importing other ones called views. So the imports are going to be, of course, create, detail, list, update, and delete. So let's go through here and do each one. Post create, and I'm going to just write create here, the slash at the end. I'm going to copy this a few times, paste it in here. Then next one was detail, post detail. Next one is list, post list, and so on. Update, finally delete. Okay, so now we've got that. Let's go back in here and refresh. And we get page not found for that main one. Well, it makes sense if we went to posts, it would just be a list of them. So post lists, I'm not going to have. I'm just going to have just like that. So that's going to be our home page for posts. It's just going to be list. So to make sure that all of these views are working correctly, I'm just going to reorder them first. And I'll explain the reordering in a moment. So going back into our view itself, I'm going to change these to create and detail list, update, and delete. There we go. So list is that first one. And then if I go to create, it's going to say create. So type out create. Now it says create, update, right? And then finally delete. And of course, detail. Cool. So that they're not really that dynamic right now, but they are web pages that are working. So there's still several things that we need to do, but something I did want to talk about is how these URLs work. Is they work from top to bottom, left to right. So if I had two create views here, so one of them is going to be, I'm basically saying that it's the same URL pattern. One of them is create. They're all both create, but they're going to have different functions that handle them. So the very first one that's going to be seen is detail. So I save this and I go back in here and refresh to create. Notice it still says detail. And if I change the order of these, and now it goes back to create. So what Django does is it looks for the first URL that matches the pattern that's being requested, and then it stops there. Hopefully that didn't scare you too much, but basically, whatever URL appears first in that urls.py that matches this, it's going to stop and render whatever that view is, which is coming here. Cool. So that's URLs, a little bit more dynamic of URLs. There's still more stuff that we need to do to URLs, but before we do that, let's actually get this list view working. So if you have any questions on this stuff, let us know. Otherwise, let's keep going.